if an AI agent makes the unthinkable multi-million-pound mistake, who's going to be accountable?
They're so confidently hallucinating that you don't know. They almost convince you that they're right.
I always get worried whether my API key is being thrown out on GitHub somewhere and someone is like ripping me off and I see a big credit card bill.
Let's get a bit more technical. How do your AI agents actually work under the hood? How do they reason, plan, use tools, decide what actions to take next, and ultimately what makes them different from pre-built workflows and your other chatbots, for instance?
In this world of autonomous agents, what is maybe the absolute worst thing that you feel could go wrong on your watch, and what keeps you up at night?
The only thing I would probably say is trust is an important factor. And as much as people did not realize about agentic AI 2 years ago, by early next year, I think people will be talking about trust. Without that, things would not be operationalized.
When selling AI, it is feeling a bit like the Wild West. What's the biggest sales lie that's being told about AI agents within the enterprise space right now?
Agents are set and forget. They are not. And that's how people are selling, but that's not a reality.
The space within AI and agents is moving so quickly that I have to just to keep up. It's kind of really hard. So one of the key anecdotes from early on, we're trying to do this process with merchant onboarding, and one of the things they were making sure was that any vendors must not sell you things like alcohol or marijuana and things like that. We said, hey, if you see the word alcohol anytime, reject that vendor. But then it started rejecting vendors which were saying that we do not serve alcohol. It was like, hey, because it says alcohol, I'm not going to pass it. So a lot of things can go wrong with agents.
There have been many occasions where I have been very close to signing a large deal with customers, but then they have thrown in security and the governance folks at me. And what I have seen is that some of those aspects are not negotiable at all, right? Chiru talked about automation not being negotiable, but I believe security, governance, compliance are absolutely not negotiable. And I've seen deals slipping through, getting delayed because of that.
Everyone from hyperscalers to startups and scale-ups, they're claiming an agentic AI story. How do we cut through the noise and help customers evaluate what's real versus vaporware? What should buyers really be asking the vendors?
I think if I'm a buyer, I will just ask, how do you ensure that your revenue is linked to my success? And if they can't answer that confidently, then of course I would not look at that vendor.
If you had to make one bold prediction about where agentic automation is going in the next 2 to 3 years in terms of adoption, capability, and the impact on business operations, what would it be?
Will you buy a Ferrari where brakes don't work 1% of the time, or will you buy a Toyota where brakes are working 100% of the time? And the answer is obvious, right?
Trust literally means it's a continuous process of how you really keep things in check. It's not a check in the box at one point of time. So if you want to really think about a trust infrastructure, the way you want to continuously prevent risks, continuously measure how agents are performing, and continuously trace how the decisions are being made. If you put those three things together, then you have a defensible or defendable AI in place.
Welcome back to the Secure CyberConnect podcast in our third episode of the Integrity First AI series with Jay Adamson, Lauren Atkinson, and our special guest co-host, Chiru Bhavansankar. Each episode goes beyond theory to unpack how leaders think about governance, security, observability, and accountability while shipping fast on AWS. So we can expect some practical conversations on automation patterns, guardrails, decision provenance, from the people who've actually built and operated AI in production, where trust is non-negotiable. On this episode, we're delighted to be joined by Manish Balal and Sumit Wasuja to discuss from automation to accountability. Manish is a senior enterprise technology executive with over 15 years of experience in AI, automation, and go-to-market strategies. Founding team member of AWS Quick Automate, Amazon's agentic automation service, he's held senior roles at Automation Anywhere, Barclays, and Infosys, building and scaling technology platforms across financial services, healthcare, and life sciences. Manish also brings a rare combination of product depth and commercial acumen to the conversations that define the future of AI within enterprise. Sumit is a principal product manager at AWS, focused on bringing agentic AI into real enterprise operations. He's the founding product manager and head of product for Amazon Quick Automate, and a service that helps organizations modernize complex business processes using AI agents. Prior to this, Sumit has led large-scale enterprise transformation initiatives at both Amazon and Deloitte Consulting, helping global organizations redesign operations through advanced technology and automation. Manish, Sumit, welcome to the Secure Cyber Connect podcast, and thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
So, Chiru, if you could kick things off with our very brief high-level overview on some of the key themes that we're going to be kicking off with in the discussion today.
Sure. Thank you, Jay. Automation is non-negotiable for enterprises. That's the future. While like robotic process automation is completely being transformed with agentic automation, like we are going to look at the role that automation is going to play and how AWS is actually playing a key role in bringing that agentic automation to the enterprises, and especially focusing on how to bring trust element around the automation. So it's all about not just about speed, but it's also about combining and balancing that with trust.
Sure. And Sumit, one thing we always ask many of our guests is if you've maybe got something that you want to talk about in terms of something you may be passionate about, or a skill that you have that LinkedIn, and the profiles that we all have on there maybe completely misses out, but actually makes you a better problem solver.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. Well, I think one thing that makes me a better problem solver, or something that I've been passionate throughout my life, is my passion for reading. I love reading. I almost go through, either a book or a research paper every month. And the way it has helped me off late with my career is the space within AI and agents is moving so quickly that I have to just to keep up. It's kind of really hard, but it's just the passion that I have that I keep learning, and that I think is something I really think is very valuable.
Absolutely. And Manish, with your own experience at the intersection of go-to-market and AWS automation, could you maybe describe one near miss or maybe a significant challenge in your career that very much defined or changed how you view the trust side of cybersecurity?
There have been many occasions where I have been very close to signing a large deal with customers, but then they have thrown in security and the governance folks at me. And what I have seen is that some of those aspects are not negotiable at all, right? Chiru talked about automation not being negotiable, but I believe security, governance, compliance are absolutely not negotiable. And I've seen deals slipping through, getting delayed because of that. So security and governance is the number one marker for me. What I also learned is one of my managers, he told me that, will you buy a Ferrari where brakes don't work 1% of the time, or will you buy a Toyota where brakes are working 100% of the time? And the answer is obvious, right? So I think that is my biggest learning in selling automation and agents to a variety of enterprises across the globe. It's governance is not negotiable.
Yeah, nothing spoils a good conversation more than security. So both of you, maybe Sumit, you go first. In this world of autonomous agents, what is maybe the absolute worst thing that you feel could go wrong on your watch, and what keeps you up at night?
Well, that's a great question. A lot of things, but I think agents are an exciting technology. On one hand, sometimes they act super smart. On the other hand, sometimes they hallucinate and they are so confidently hallucinating that you don't know, they almost convince you that they're right. So one of the key, anecdotes from early on when, agents were just new, we're trying to do this process with, uh, you know, uh, merchant onboarding for one of our customers. And one of the things they were making sure was that any vendors they're trying to onboard must not sell, things like alcohol or marijuana and things like that. So we, as part of the prompt, and this was early days, we said, hey, if you see the word alcohol anytime, they should, reject that vendor because it seems like they must be selling alcohol. But then it started rejecting vendors which were saying that we do not serve alcohol. Because of the way we had prompted it, it was like, hey, because it says alcohol, I'm not gonna, pass it. So a lot of things can go wrong with agents. The idea is to, properly test, evaluate, take the time to make sure they, they're working as desired.
Absolutely. And Manish, maybe if you would like to throw an example in.
Yeah, I want to throw a personal example actually. I recently set up OpenClaw, if you're following what's happening in that world. So, an agent that is working on my own personal machine. So, this is out of my professional space. And I always get worried whether my API key is being thrown out on GitHub somewhere and someone is like ripping me off and I see a big credit card bill. While the technology is exciting, as Sumit mentioned, we got to be aware that there are many inherent risks and we got to manage them while we are deploying them to production.
So let's talk a little bit more about defining the era of agentic AI. And Manish, if you could field this first question, we know there's an infinite amount of buzz and rhetoric around agentic AI. How do you define it? Why is this different from maybe the old RPA and workflow automation waves?
Yeah, I want to go back a few years, right? So I started off my career in about 2004, 2005, and my first project was with one of the largest credit card majors. And that's where I saw screen scraping as the technology back like 21 years ago, right? And it unfortunately still exists. Then I came into the automation world where we've seen RPA boards that are, you have to define each and every rule. Then RPA became intelligent automation, document processing came into picture, and now agents and LLMs are kind of coming into the enterprise world, right? The biggest difference I feel is RPA is like muscle. It was muscle powering through everything that you have to do, and you had to tell them everything that you got to do. But LLMs are bringing in more of the brain that was absent, and that comes with a risk. But of course, that I think is kind of a big takeaway for me, that you have to use brain along with the muscle effectively to deliver a business outcome for the customer.
Makes sense. And Sumit, at Amazon, there's apparently a famous philosophy of working backwards from the customer. Can you explain what that means in practice and how that approach has shaped the core vision behind your agentic automation platform? And maybe if you could then talk about maybe what sort of fundamental problems that you're solving, within those existing automation tools, the RPA, the iPaaS, the low code. What are you struggling to address there?
Absolutely. So, working backwards is a very popular, mechanism that we use at Amazon to basically figure out what to build, right? Working backwards means starting with a very clear understanding of who the customer is and what is the problem we are trying to solve. Before we build anything at Amazon, right, we write a future press release and FAQs that describe the product as if it already exists. So basically, we just write the press release we would actually do when we actually launch the product, and we haven't actually built anything. What that does is it forces clarity. It forces us to articulate who the customer is, what is the pain that they're experiencing today, and what is the customer journey looks like, so that we can inform why the solution genuinely matters versus trying to build something from the technology first. So it's basically, it says, don't start from the technology, but start from the customer problem. And one of the biggest lessons that approach teaches you, or personally that I have learned, is that it helps you fall in love with the problem versus falling in love with the solution. And it's really important in this day and age to actually do that, because the solution keeps changing because the agentic technology is moving so rapidly. And now, actually talking about like how I went about writing the vision for Quick Automate, I think the key thing within the agentic AI and automation space is that there are already a lot of tools that are available. So automation has been there, as Manish mentioned, has been there for a long time. But when you look at closely at a customer problem, it's not about actually just automating individual tasks. The real challenge is to run end-to-end business processes that span systems, that span departments, that change frequently, um, and they have different requirements. Both from sometimes there's a requirement for making decisions and being intelligent, and sometimes there's a requirement of being really, really deterministic and predictable. So the goal for me was to actually build uh, the fastest, the simplest, and the most cost-effective way for organizations to running their business processes, and especially when these business processes were evolving over time and changing rapidly. So the idea was, can we build something that can help customers maintain their business processes cost effectively? That really was what is the problem that we're solving.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chiru, we've talked about AI governance a lot with and certainly with yourself. Everyone's very much fixated now on responsible AI governance. You've often framed the problem very differently as integrity first AI. What does integrity first AI mean? Why is it becoming critical as enterprises are deploying more and more of these autonomous agents?
Yeah, there is a lot of talk about agentic AI, and it's the bread and butter of automation. And about 3 years ago, when our Hasi was founded, we basically also fell in love with the problem, like Sumit mentioned, and that's where the synergy comes in between our Hasi and AWS as well. We having come from other cloud vendors ecosystem, spent 60+ years myself. We literally solely partner with AWS now for a reason. It's about falling in love with the problem, as they mentioned, and that's quite evident in every relationship and interaction that we have with AWS. 3 years ago, we went to the market and we said, if this AI or generative AI is going to really take over the world. At that time, remember, there was no agentic AI concept as well, 3+ years ago. We said, if this is going to take over the world and becomes a part of business critical processes, what does it mean for enterprises? And we came up with 5 principles. Those 5 principles were responsibility, adaptability, predictability, integrity, and defensibility. That's literally, we coined the term called rapid, and we actually have a trademark on that. And then we said, okay, if we have to coin or these 5 principles, when they collectively come together, what is the operational discipline? How would enterprises really adopt this? And then we said, that's what is called integrity first AI. And in fact, our Hasi has applied for a trademark for AI with integrity. That was also one of the first terms that we came up with 3+ years ago. And gradually we realized that integrity first AI resonates better as an operational discipline than AI with integrity. And that's how we really lead with that. So it's not just agentic AI, you want to lead with integrity first AI.
Absolutely.
No, that's brilliant. And let's talk about how AI systems work, the reality on the ground. If you'd indulge us and our audience, let's get a bit more technical. How do your AI agents actually work under the hood? How do they reason, plan, use tools, decide what actions to take next, and ultimately, what makes them different from pre-built workflows and your other chatbots, for instance?
Yeah, sure. So if you're talking simply about agents, right? The key thing about agents is they go through this observe, reason, and act loop. So they observe the environment, whether it's a system, whether it's logs, the reason through that, to understand what that is, and then they act. Right. This is, and they continue to do so until they reach a limit or a goal is achieved. But where it gets really interesting with business process automation is that agents need to act on a variety of surfaces. Uh, Automations can need to be done on UI or websites or web applications or with APIs, or you need to orchestrate humans to be part of those automations, right? Um, I'll take an example of a computer use agent that we have, right? A computer use agent needs to take action on a website or a web application. Uh, and for that, instead of building a large language model, what we built was called a large action model that can actually take actions on websites and computer, right? It has a brain of its own that helps it decide, what to do given a website, and then it has an action model that helps it takes an action. Think about clicking, navigating, and so on and so forth. We also have what we call a general purpose agent that can work with a variety of tasks. It can handle spreadsheets, documents, write code, invoke humans where it is not sure on what to do next. The key thing, right, between a traditional workflow, which is kind of rule based, or a chatbot, which actually can just provide you insights. With agents in automations, you take actions, right? Um, and the interesting part is, as you build workflows, work is passed on from one agent to another, or one agent to a piece of code that's more of deterministic in nature. What we have found most important with agents is the ability for them to provide a structured output. Because if they provide a structured output, uh, downstream steps within the workflow can actually use those outputs reliably as an input, even if they are not agents. So the world where you have agents and non-agentic features kind of working together as part of a workflow, uh, it gets really, really interesting. And that's something that we're solving with our product.
No, I appreciate you sharing. I know there's some fascinating use cases on the horizon. And Manesh, when you walk into a customer meeting, say perhaps later on this afternoon, what are some of the business pain points that really resonate with boards immediately, and what are buyers leaning into at the moment?
So, I mean, the business problems haven't really changed over the past, 10, 15 years, right? Especially in the process space. Everyone wants to save money. They want to optimize their processes and generate more productivity. What has changed is that the expectations of productivity are actually now multifold, right? So instead of expecting, say, a 30% spike in productivity, the expectation is now 60% or 70%. So that expectation has increased. Governance compliance is absolutely there. Another thing that is unique to this particular agentic AI space is the cost. It's hard to estimate what the cost of the technology is. Unlike in the previous world where you just buy licenses, and that's about it. Your cost is capped. You know what you need to achieve in that particular cost. Here, because of the tokens and the very variable nature of the cost, right? It's hard to construct a business case. So in fact, that was one reason Sumit and I, we worked on that particular problem, and we came up with a parameter called agent hour, which it's available publicly on our website. And we are charging agent hours for our service, and we're charging it at, say, $3 an hour. So that makes it predictable and easier for the customers to structure a business case. So yeah, I mean, but the overall problem space hasn't really changed. It's that customers are just expecting more now.
Well, that's fascinating. Appreciate you sharing. And do you mind sharing perhaps a real world story where an agent's delivered an outcome that traditional automation simply couldn't? And perhaps a story around a aha moment that a client and customers benefited from recently.
We have plenty, right? But I think one of the best ones is we're working with a very large financial services customer of ours, and they are into business of selling data to asset management firms and investment banks. And one of the data points that they sell is earnings release data, as well as when is the next dividend due. Those are just a couple of data points that they package into the whole data that they are selling, and they get money out of it. So their problem was they had like 25, 30 people who were going to around 1,800 public websites every day for Europe and scraping that information manually, which is very challenging, as you can imagine, not a fun job. Uh, we asked them to automate that process using, the UI agent and the other workflow structures that we have, different actions, deterministic actions, human in the loop, and they constructed that workflow. And now that workflow is saving them over 80% in their actual TCO. And the folks that were working that, they are now doing something that they really enjoy, and they are working directly with the customers. So that was kind of one of the aha moments for me. Just imagine that, can you write rules for 1,800 websites with RPA? You cannot, simply cannot. So those were like out of the question, right? So these kind of processes are being automated now with agents, and we are super excited about the outcomes we are achieving for the customers.
No, that's fascinating. Take my hats off to you and the team. Certainly feel that giving organizations back time to focus on more strategic outcomes is beneficial. And the impact of that moving forward is yet to be seen at scale. And true, enterprises can often explain their data, they can explain their models, but of course, when an AI agent makes a decision, the lineage of that sometimes can be unclear. So why is decision provenance becoming one of the biggest trust gaps in enterprise AI?
It's a responsibility, right? Who takes ownership? Imagine you have an automated car. If car actually makes a decision driven by AI model and gets into an accident, like who is really responsible? The same thing applies if I'm an executive bringing in AI technology to transform business processes. Now, who is going to defend that decision for me? And if I'm the person responsible in bringing this on board, it's not just about automating things, but it's also about how those decisions that are being made independently of me are being traced. And that's what we call it as a decision trust architecture or decision provenance. It's an evolution of what we used to do with data in the past. There is something called as data provenance. You'll be able to prove that X, Y, and Z data actually was put together and in order to produce a specific end result. But even in this case, what we say is how did a specific model consume the data and then actually produce a specific outcome? Has this been a change in the what is called as a data drift or a schema drift that resulted in the change in the outcome of a specific decision, right? And that's about connecting those dots, decision to the schema drift and the data drift is decision provenance. And it's significantly important because that's how, if there is an issue on an ongoing basis, as some of the things that Manish and Sumit shared of experiences where things went wrong, how quickly I would be able to go back and do root cause analysis. And you have this knowledge and information, then your root cause analysis becomes faster because your window for mitigating risks with AI is very minimal compared to what we could do in the past. You cannot take a month-long root cause analysis when AI is continuously making decisions. You have to be able to do that fast. And that's why decision provenance becomes a significant factor, and we call it decision trust architecture.
No, that's fascinating. And to our audience, if that's something that you're navigating at the moment and you want to know more about that, be sure to hit the like button. And I know at the end of the session, of course, Chiru and Horaci have got a big announcement to share as well in relation to recent recognition. So to our audience, stay tuned. And as we move on, Manesh, enterprise adoption is one thing on the slide decks and another thing in reality. What does realistic rollout look like from pilot to production, and what are the biggest blockers that businesses are seeing at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, right? And I think while selling the service to our enterprise customers, that's our daily chore. What I have realized is that most customers don't just now value a POC; they actually want to see something working in production. So we want to make sure that we help them deploy the process in production with the necessary guardrails, and they actually get value. And after that, we work with our strategic partners like Chiru, right, to help customers identify the processes that will achieve further business value. So our typical motion is land with one use case, make it successful, and then inspire customers to find more use cases where they can achieve value. And what we realize is that after you identify some 3 or 4 processes, the savings from that particular project kind of funnels the next investment, and it kind of becomes a virtuous cycle. And we are really fortunate to be working with partners like Arhasi, who are working closely with customers. In fact, we are working with one of the accounting firms who have tons of processes. We wouldn't know what those processes are, and that's where I think the expertise of partners comes into picture to help those processes, because technology is just one bit of it. You need to understand what the process is and where customer wants to go, and that's where I think the partners like Arasi come into picture.
No, I certainly agree with you on there. We're strong believers in collaboration over competition, bringing diverse thoughts and mindsets, for instance. And Summit, there's growing conversations around multi-agent systems, agents that collaborate, delegate, and even debate. Is this reality today, or is it still aspirational? And following that, how do you think about orchestrating multi-agent working together? Do you think that's a route that we should go down at this point in time?
Yeah. So multi-agent systems are real, and they're here to stay. And I would say that they are they're going to be the future, right? Most patterns more common pattern that I've seen that have worked well today are more like a planner and a specialist model, where there's a planner agent that comes up with a plan and delegates the steps in the plan to specialist agents. So for example, right, you may have one agent that knows how to do information extraction from documents, and there may be another one that may know how to interact with enterprise systems or do validate compliance rules. And the other reason, like, the multi-agent the framework works really well is even in an enterprise environment. You have the concept of teams and departments where there are delegated responsibilities. So you don't want the person who's creating an invoice to also be the person who approves an invoice. So similarly, you want an agent that can create an invoice and maybe an agent that can approve an invoice, and make sure that they have got different information, they've got different they have different capabilities, different accesses, and so on and so forth. But what I've really seen, right, with multi-agents is that the key is to be able to mix agents with deterministic automation steps that improves both reliability and speed. Because agents would, as Manish earlier pointed out, right, sometimes they think a lot. They the tokens and the cost may go way up. But there are some things where you don't really need an agent. It's actually just a simple rule. So you don't really want agents to be a part of that, like simple API calls and so forth. So I know that we see a lot of multi-agent collaborations, but to me, like, specifically for workflow automation, I think having structured multi-agents systems collaborate within a governed workflow environment is what I believe is kind of the holy grail, which gives you the best of both intelligent agents as well as environment with specific guardrails. And the other interesting thing that I've seen kind of coming up in this world is more around constructs like memory. So agents that get really good at doing something, and as they keep doing the same thing again and again, they develop memory so that they can do that much better and much faster, eventually contributing to increased accuracy, increased performance, and lower cost, which is really what you're looking for.
No, that's brilliant. And just sort of dig a little bit deeper, when the agents are starting to act autonomously, in SMEs as well as enterprises, they're accessing systems, making decisions, moving data. Of course, governance becomes critical there. So tell us a little bit more in terms of what your product does in terms of handling security guardrails, access controls, the audit trails, and of course the human in the loop checkpoint.
Absolutely. So I think the way I look at governance and trust is almost like a four-layered structure. The first layer is kind of the identity and access control. So agents only get access to the tools and systems that they are explicitly authorized to use. I took the example of invoice creation agent and an approval agent. The creation agent only has the ability to create an invoice, and the approval agent can only, let's say, approve an invoice, and so on, right? Then the second layer is the guardrails and the policy enforcement, right? We restrict what actions and agents can take, validates the inputs, outputs, and deterministically apply guardrails around what an agent can and cannot do. After you've got, and both of these are like design and authoring of an automation time, guardrails. But the third layer is is auditability. Every decision, every chain, thought process from the agent, every tool call, they're all fully traceable and auditable, and we provide full visibility and dashboards for customers to, audit the happenings. And finally, last but not the least, I think the most critical part is kind of the human in the loop checkpoints. Customers can decide as they are authoring the workflows where they want humans in the workflow. Also, they can delegate this job to agents at certain points, where if the agents are not sure on what to do, they can actually reach out to humans or create tasks for humans, ask for questions, and request their approval before processing. So I think this four-layered governance structure works really, really well.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. And Summer, was there perhaps a time when you were really surprised by early adopters, and what was the hardest lesson learned now?
Yeah. So, I think this is kind of the biggest technology revolution I've seen in my life. And I've seen kind of the web revolution, I've seen the mobile revolution, I've seen the cloud revolution. I think this is the biggest one, and
couldn't agree more.
It's moving so quickly, right? And I was telling about the research papers. Every time I read a new research paper, my jaw kind of drops to the floor because of how quickly things are moving, right? But the hard lesson that I've learned from all of this is from in the production systems, exceptions matter more than the happy paths, right? Early on, we could build like agents that were 70, 80, or even 90% accurate or effective, but like 80% of the time then went to figuring out how to make the remaining 10% work, how to have the right controls, how to have the right guardrails, how to detect false negatives. That has been a biggest challenge, which is like when agents like super confident and is incorrect, how do you identify those and reduce the impact for those? So I think like the amount of time that I've had to spend those on the last mile has been eye-opening and a great learning experience for me.
No, I appreciate you sharing. And when enterprises deploy agentic automation at scale, how should they really measure success? Beyond just the time saving, and what KPIs truly capture the value of that agent?
Yeah. So, I mean, enterprises exist to serve their customers, right? And this is again, the customer obsessed product manager in me talking, right? When I work with my customers, I try to figure out what their goal is, right? Sometimes the goal is really, to lower the cost so they can pass on that benefits back to the customer. So the real thing to actually measure there is the cost, to make sure you're looking at all the costs that are involved and measuring the cost and the ROI effectively. But very often, it's more about scalability, agility, um, and responding quickly in order to improve the business. I think what I've seen most is kind of customers want to scale their business without scaling the cost, right? And they're like, you have to work through them, model scenarios and what the future would look like, and how would the cost scale, how would the business scale. So I think it's the devil's generally in the details, and that's where I work very closely with customers to figure out what is it that they're really looking for and what is the problem they're solving.
No, that's fascinating. Appreciate you sharing. And yeah, Minesh, over to you. Everyone from hyperscalers to startups and scale-ups, they're claiming an agentic AI story. How do we cut through the noise and help customers evaluate what's real versus vaporware? What should buyers really be asking the vendors?
I think if I'm a buyer, I will just ask, how do you ensure that your revenue is linked to my success? And if they can't answer that confidently, then of course I would not look at that vendor. And the reason I'm saying that is what's happening in the industry, especially in the SaaS world, is, and to some extent we are also, all of us are guilty as charged, is our focus is on meeting our quarterly targets, selling as many licenses as we could to the customer, and then the onus is on the customer to use the licenses and the software. In the end, what happens is you just leave a lot of software with them, which ends up as shelfware because they can't find use cases, they can't deploy those licenses. That's where we are trying to break apart, and this is what AWS philosophy has been all along, right? We charge you for the usage. If you're not using it and not getting any value, then of course you're not going to pay for the usage, right? So in this particular case, right, for the product that we are working on, we are charging what we call in a metric called agent hours. So when customers use the agents, then only they pay. And if they feel that they're not getting value, they won't use it. So it's directly linked to the outcomes that they are wanting to achieve. And I think that has worked for us. And I believe this whole paradigm will change, and everyone in this industry has to adapt to this, because otherwise it's very hard to sell just shelfware and move on in this day and age.
No, I appreciate you sharing. And as a brief follow-up question on that, Manesh, I understand that you guys and girls have got a significant community. There's a lot of knowledge sharing within that community. And that's something that both myself and Jay are trying to emulate, for instance, with the Secure Cyber Connect community. So how important are communities, and can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing to ensure that use cases are being shared?
Yeah, so we have multiple programs. In fact, we have a large Quick community. There are thousands of users who are part of the community. We conduct events across the globe. Those events have workshops. We talk about what the product can do for them, what are the different use cases, what's coming up on the roadmap. We also have several sessions on YouTube. If you just Google up, you'll find a lot of knowledge sharing sessions. We also have a concept called workshops within AWS, where we can share a link to you. You can simply spin up an environment and go through that whole thing using just a self-paced, like a self-paced exercise, and build an automation or an agent by yourself. So there are quite a few things that we do, and being part of AWS helps. So that's one element of it. And then we also work with partners like Arasi, who are kind of our voice in the market and amplifying what we intend to do for our customers.
No, that's fascinating. And to our audience, if you want to find out more about that, we're certainly going to put some links in the description, and be sure to hit the subscribe button.
Absolutely.
So guys, let's maybe slightly lighten the questions a bit now going forward, and do a bit of a quick fire, if you will. We want to talk a bit more about the realities of human-centric architecture, careers in tech. So if you can, try and get them down to maybe one sentence, not strictly, but as punchy a response as possible. So Manish, we'll kick off with, in your opinion, what's the biggest sales lie that's being told about AI agents within the enterprise space right now?
Agents are set and forget. They are not. And that's how people are selling, but that's not a reality.
Yeah, fair. Yeah. And I mean, Ish, again, when selling AI, it is like many swathes of new, frontier technology. It is feeling a bit like the Wild West. People are looking at tech sales today, and they're wondering what is the unfiltered reality of selling these products versus the glamorous front of house that we see pushed out on LinkedIn every day. And talk us through that unfiltered reality a bit more. Just give us a bit of an update on that.
I think the biggest, I mean, LinkedIn is like, I really don't, I mean, all of us know what goes on LinkedIn, right? And especially in using, Gen AI, people are just splashing LinkedIn with a lot of, random updates. What I feel is, I think the reality of sales is more listening and less talking. Once you start listening to the customer problem, going back to working backwards, I think that has been one of the most important learnings that I had at AWS is we let the customer talk, understand what the problem is, and then recommend a solution. That doesn't happen in sales. And all the glamour, the expensive dinners and all of that I think is a thing of the past, because customers are also very educated. So as long as you can, tell them what you are bringing to the table and articulate value, I think that's about it.
Absolutely. And staying with you, Manish, if someone wants to jump from closing deals to actually running the division, in your opinion, what separates a good account executive from a really good, strong sales leader?
I've had some really good managers in the past who actually also went on to become CEOs or running large divisions. I think one thing that I've observed that is a hallmark of a great leader is a leader has to be adaptable. They should not be averse to rolling up their sleeves and getting into a deal, or paint a larger strategic vision. If you're only doing one of these, then you're not going to be successful as a leader.
And Summit, the AI product manager job title. It's hot. Everyone wants a piece now. What is the harsh reality of being a project manager within the AI space that nobody's talking about and shining a light on as much as they should do?
Yeah. I think the harsh reality about being an AI product manager is the productivity expectation, even from a product manager, is exceptionally high. So the burnout for product managers is real, because you got to stay abreast with all that's happening, do the things, and be a role model for the rest of the team as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are a PM, you want to move more into a leadership position, and especially as AI starts automating that execution piece, what is the unautomatable skill that you think people will need to master that, that career advancement, that promotion?
Yeah, I think. I think it's going to be across the board. But one unautomatable skill is very high judgment, right? People talk about agents being able to do judgments, make decisions, but the biggest and the highest stake decisions on what needs to get built, what needs to be done versus not, and the taste side of the things, I think those are all very high judgment decisions that are unautomatable.
I've got a feeling we're going to be spending the rest of our lives trying to do that. So in terms of accountability in the future, looking towards how things are going to play out, and Chiru, let's bring you back into play here. If an AI agent makes the unthinkable multi-million-pound mistake, who's going to be accountable? We've touched on this in some previous episodes, but let's talk a little bit more about how we're actually going to build audit trails that are undoubtedly coming, that they're going to satisfy the regulators in the boardroom.
Yeah, you hit a very good point about how do we satisfy regulators, right? The technology exists today. Manish and Sumit can speak to that. Literally everything that needs to accomplish, it's out there. I think where the gap is, and where customers are expecting as well, is how do you take the technology and connect to the business problem that enterprises want to accomplish. especially if we talk about regulators. Take an example of financial institution. How do I do liquidity monitoring reporting to SEC? Every financial institution needs to do that. And how do we now put these pieces together and connect straight to that? And to, I think, Manish and Sumit's point, like, customers are not just expecting a POC, they're expecting like an operational or a functional system in a short span of time. Unless you have that strong domain piece and how do you connect and with the frameworks in place, it becomes very challenging, I think. And that's literally where that gap exists today, and customers are really looking for the direction there.
Yeah, and look, we've talked to you directly about a lot of this, in terms of trust layers for AI decisions. But as organizations move from, these human-driven workflows to ultimately, these AI-driven decisions, what kind of trust infrastructure is it that really needs to exist underneath these systems?
Yeah, it's a threefold approach when we say like there is a trust infrastructure, and a lot of the times people naturally allude to like security, governance, X, Y, and Z, and those are like the bread and butter of trust. But and also people think that when they think of security and governance, they think it's a checkbox at a point in time. But that's not the case. To Manish's point, he said set and forget. That's not the case. Similarly, like, trust literally means it's a continuous process of how you really keep things in check. It's not a check in the box at one point of time. So if you want to really think about a trust infrastructure, the way you want to continuously prevent risks, continuously measure how agents are performing, and continuously trace like how the decisions are being made. If you put those three things together, then you have a defensible or defendable AI in place.
So just following up on that, and looking ahead, do you think the enterprise the enterprises will really all eventually need something like a trust layer for ID decisions, the same way they've got these various security layers for their applications?
Yeah, I mean, think of like three things, right? There is a trust layer, there is an intelligence layer, and there is an experience layer. Trust layer is like every AI deployment that's going there would need a trust layer. Okay, and then intelligence layer is what like Manish and Sumit have been talking about, the automation piece, bringing intelligence close to processes. And there is an experience layer. It's about how do you connect these two things to the customer's business problem, right? So those are the three things are the bread and butter of a successful AI implementation.
Absolutely.
That's brilliant. And before we get into some predictions, I mentioned earlier, Chiru and the team at Harasi have got an exclusive announcement to share, some good news. Can you enlighten our audience on what Gartner have said about you guys and girls recently, Chiru?
I would say what Gartner has said. Like, we just got referenced in Gartner's market guide for Agentic Analytics 2026 in about how we actually solve business problems. And then customers speak about us as well. One of the AWS customers literally told us last week they spent about multi-million dollars solving a specific AI problem with another vendor or partner. And like, we were brought in, and then within 4 weeks, we literally solved the problem.
Brilliant.
Right? That's the speed of execution. That comes from a lot of R&D that we do and keep things ready to make AWS successful in front of our customers.
Oh, that's fascinating. I want to commend you and the team on that. And I know there's been one or two announcements on LinkedIn, but perhaps our audience on YouTube, Spotify haven't noticed this, but Chiru is actually going to be coming across to the UK in the coming months and joining us at one of the events in Manchester. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that, Chiru?
Yeah, I mean, Manish is also a part of that. We'll be actually sharing the stage there, presenting at the Digital Transformation Expo in Manchester on April 30th. We are going to talk about agentic AI automation, knowledge graphs.
That's fascinating. And to our audience, again, we'll be sure to share a link within the description for you to get your free tickets to attend. And of course, myself and Jay will be on site doing some live recording sessions there. But back to the session, Manish, Summit. If you had to make one bold prediction about where agentic automation is going in the next 2 to 3 years in terms of adoption, capability, and the impact on business operations, what would it be?
Do you want to go first, Sumit?
Yeah. My prediction is that startups are going to, be very, very successful. In my experience, I think startups are moving very quickly. adopting AI the right way and have the right mental model. Whereas I see, the large enterprises lagging behind. So I think the disruption will create a lot of very valuable startups.
Yeah. I think I agree with Sumit. There will be like many 5 people unicorns, right, that are emerging just because of this. But one thing that I want to see is agents becoming boring in enterprise, where it becomes just a way of life, right? And they deliver, an outcome that is not surprising. So I wish that happens, that an agents become kind of mainstream across the board.
That's brilliant. And Chiru, any bold predictions from yourself?
I mean, like the expert spoke, I totally allude with what they said. Uh, the only thing I would probably say is um, trust is an important factor. And as much as people did not realize about agentic AI 2 years ago, um, by early next year, I think people will be talking about trust. Without that, things would not be operationalized.
No, that's brilliant. And Jay, I just wanted to ask your opinion. Of course, I know we spoke about this off camera, but how important is it that startups and scale ups have that layer of trust, that layer of AI governance before they launch a product, especially with VCs trying to push things out?
I think it's absolutely pivotal, and I agree with some. I think this is the time now for the new swathe of technology. We're not just seeing AI transforming the cyberspace in terms of the platforms that they're offering, but I think in terms of the trust layer and having an enterprise grade model trust layer in it's absolutely essential. And I think it's the differentiator between certainly in the millions of people who are building platforms, and I call them the bedroom AI platforms that are being peddled out there that we get approached with 50 times a week. I think it's having that enterprise grade model, the trust, the 42001, the compliance, the governance. It's absolutely crucial. So yeah, I think, and I think as Sumit said, I think that is really a big leg up for the startup scale up space. And I think the enterprise will face a lot more challenges in rinsing it through the system in the most effective way. So yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting time, a game-changing time in many ways. And I'm also going to take from this episode, falling in love with the problem, guys. I think that's going to be a mantra for life for me going forward, quite frankly. Wise words. Just to finish on,
I just want to add there, Jay, that's what probably my wife thought.
that was kind of what I meant, really, to be fair. I think it just works across all the aspects of my life, right, frankly. But yeah, in terms of you guys, and if you'd like to maybe Manish first and then Sumit, what does the future hold for you both? Where do you, if you can even say, where do you see the next sort of couple of years?
So I personally really want to see this technology getting adopted at scale. I mean, while there is a lot of glamour associated with it, it hasn't really scaled. There are, while we have a lot of use cases, the enterprise adoption has been sporadic. So I want to spend my next 2 years to make sure that this technology gets adopted at scale by large enterprises solving multi-billion-dollar problems. And that's the goal that I want to invest my time in.
Absolutely. Sumit?
Something very similar to what Manish said, but largely the key thing is maybe there would be a new technology, maybe agents would be boring an year later, and something else will show up. The key thing for me is again focusing on the right things and focusing on the right problems to solve, and making life easier for our customers day in and day out.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, look, for any of our listeners who want to stay connected beyond the episode, obviously LinkedIn presents itself as a normal touch point, but is there anywhere else that they can reach out to you guys?
I think LinkedIn is the way to go. I'm also on Twitter, not very active, but they can find me there too.
Yeah, same here. LinkedIn, Twitter. Love to hear from you all.
Excellent. Well, look, Manish, Sumit, and of course, Chiru, I would like to say a huge thank you to all of you. As always, the community and all our listeners will have found a huge amount of interest and value in today's episode. If people want to continue the discussion for more sustained engagement, we invite you to join the secure CyberConnect community, where, as always, we offer a range of interviews across technology and security professionals and insights, mutual mentoring, online networking, panel discussions and masterclasses at no cost. Thank you very much, everybody.